What's up guys, I got a brand new video for you today. Today, call this an appreciation video, call it a review, but today we're looking at my Sigma 18-35 f1.8. And this could be one of the best lenses ever made, and it's definitely one of the best lenses to adapt to any camera system. Sigma released this lens back in 2013, and I bought it used in 2015, so it's now 4 years old, and I got it in the EF mount, so it's basically adaptable to pretty much every camera system. Sigma obviously made this for APS-C cameras like the 80D, the 70D, or the Canon M50 now if you adapt that as well. But I've adapted this lens to so many cameras, the A6000, the A6300, the GH5, the Fuji X-T2, the Fuji X-H1, the Fuji X-T30, the Blackmagic Pocket 4K. So I've adapted this lens a lot. I've even used this lens on full frame cameras like the 5D Mark IV and the A7 III. But I mainly use it on my C200 that I'm filming with right now because this is one of the best cinematic looking lenses I've ever used. So it has a zoom range of 18-35 as the name of the lens implies. In a full frame, that's somewhere around like 28-30 millimeters to like 50-56 millimeters. And it's f1.8 through the entire zoom range. The nice thing is this is all internal zooming too, so the lens barrel doesn't extend any bigger than this, it all does it internally. The zoom ring is nice and smooth and dampened as well as the focus ring. The lens is not weather sealed, but it's definitely really well made. I've had this thing for a really long time and it's got a few scuffs on the metal areas here, but the lens is basically all metal. It does have some rubber on the focus ring and the zoom ring, and I think the front filter is actually plastic. It does have the autofocus and manual focus switch on the side here. It also has a 9 rounded blade aperture and is extremely sharp at f1.8, and that actually goes through the entire zoom range. It's crazy that this lens came out in 2013. I feel like Sigma really set the bar high with this lens. It's not really that much bigger than something like the popular 35mm f1.4. It's maybe a little bit longer and slightly heavier, but I mean, you do have an entire f1.8 18mm to 35mm lens in your hand. Now, as I said previously, I've adapted this lens to many different camera systems. It's amazing on the Fuji system because Fuji doesn't have anything like this, and it's 18mm to 35mm. It just kind of covers that sweet spot on APS-C cameras, and it's f1.8. And if you're wondering how I adapted this to Fuji cameras, I've used the Finger adapter as well as the Finger Pro 2 adapter, and I'll put links in the description to those reviews if you want to check those out. And I most recently just did a shoot with this and the X-T30. Now, back in the day when I first got this lens, I actually adapted this to the Sony A6300 with the Metabones adapter, and then once the MC11 adapter came out, this one here, I actually used this one because I found that it was more consistent with autofocus. And with the MC11 adapter and this lens, it actually works really well with Sony cameras. And for most of my B-roll, if you go back a couple years, I actually shot with this and the Sony A6300 to get most of my B-roll shots. And it's amazing for product shots because you can get so close to it, because the minimum focus distance on this lens is 28 centimeters. And so you can get near macro shots with this thing, and it works really well for that type of stuff. Now that I'm thinking about it, I actually did some pickups with my C200 on a music video that we kind of forgot to shoot these scenes, and I was using this like a macro lens because it could get so close. And I had this kind of janky setup, but the actual footage looks amazing, and it's of some roses with some water droplets on it. Now, speaking of music videos, I actually DP on a lot of music videos, and I don't really talk about it that much because I kind of wanted to keep this channel mostly about photography, and because when I'm DPing on these larger projects, there's no time to talk or vlog or do any of those things, and I want to be professional because these are some bigger budgets we're working with here. So I just want to stay professional, so I don't really talk too much about cinematography and things like that. But if you're interested in that, maybe I'll make some more videos on that. But I do shoot a lot of music videos, and this is definitely one of my go-to lenses that I love to use the most. And I shoot with it on the C200 mostly, but I've even used it on Red. And most DPs will actually tell you this is like one of the best lenses you can get even for Red. And Sigma did come out with a cine version of this lens, so it's the same optics, but they rehoused it in like a way bigger housing with the gears on it and focus distance markers and things like that. And yeah, so this is a really good lens for video as well. Now, I just find the focal length with this lens on the C200 and the Super 35 sensor super handy because it hits those sweet spots, the 35mm and the 50mm. And if you're running this on a gimbal, you don't have to keep swapping the follow focus out and rebalancing the gimbal and everything like that. You can just zoom it because it's all internal zooming, and it doesn't really change the balance too much, and your AC will thank you. Now, since this lens is so sharp, I actually use something called a Tiffin Pro Mist, and that's this here, and this is the Black Pro Mist 1/4, and I put this on the lens because it just softens up the image. It doesn't really take it from being too sharp, but it just kind of takes the edge off, And so what it actually does is it'll smooth skin out, it smooths highlights, and it blooms light. So if you have something super backlit, it actually blooms the image and it looks really nice. It gives it some nice character and more of a cinematic vibe and maybe more of like a vintage look, but without losing the sharpness. Now what I should do is actually put this on the camera right now and kind of show you what it does to the background here. I'm gonna have to swap out the lens right now, but I'll just show you what it looks like. All right, so now I have the Sigma 18-35 on right now, and I'm gonna put the black Pro Mist on. You're gonna see these lights behind me kind of bloom. All right, can you see the difference there? Do you see like some blooming in those lights behind me? It makes a really big difference on like something that's super backlit, but it kind of just gives it a nice character. So obviously this lens is great, and I just talked about all the reasons why I love it so much, but I did mention that I've adapted it to full frame cameras. Well, I actually used it on the 5D Mark IV. You don't have to adapt it because the 5D Mark IV has an insane crop in 4K, and this is actually an EF mount, even though it's kind of made for EFS lenses. So you can actually use it on the 5D Mark IV if you want to shoot 4K video. But the only thing is if you switch it into 1080p, you're going to see some horrendous vignetting because this is not made for a full frame sensor. So when you're using it on the 5D Mark IV and you're in 4K, it's got a 1.74 times crop or something like that. So it's actually getting really close to Micro Four Thirds, which is annoying. And it's the exact same thing with the EOS R if you want to use that as well. Now adapting it to the Sony cameras is fine because Sony has an APS-C mode, so you just click that down and you can shoot 4K, 1080p and things like that if you want to. And it works really well with Sony. As I mentioned before, the MC11 adapter looks really good on this camera. So let's take a look at some face detection. I'm just gonna show it on the Canon and also on the A7 III and just kind of show you how well it works. So I actually found that the AF performance on the 5D Mark IV is not anything special. It does work pretty good, but it's definitely not fast and snappy like you'd want it to be. I don't know if adjusting some of the parameters on the autofocus would help that, but this is where I have it set for my normal full frame lenses. Now taking a look at it on the A7 III, you can actually tell that it focuses much faster and it does a really good job of picking up the face and keeping it in focus. And as I got closer to the camera, you can see how close the minimum focus distance is. So basically I've talked about the positives of this lens, and I tend to like to throw in some negatives because sometimes there are things I don't like, but honestly there's not much I don't like about this lens. Maybe it could have an update for weather sealing or something like that, but honestly there's nothing wrong with this lens. 18mm to 35mm with an f1.8 through the entire zoom range. And I never even talked about price because it's cheap. Well, it's cheap for a lens like this. It's like having 3 primes in one lens, and it's technically that sharp as far as I'm concerned. But this lens is only $799, and that's not that expensive for a lens like this, of this quality and image quality as well. And I've even seen it go on sale sometimes for $650 US. So if you can catch it on sale or even buy it used, this lens has been out for so long now, you can find a used one probably for around 500 bucks, and it's definitely worth 500 bucks. Anyway, I just thought I'd make a video on it because I find myself grabbing it off the shelf all the time, throwing it in my camera bag, and I've never really talked about it. It's definitely one of my main lenses that I use the most, especially on video shoots and DP work. And you know, I think this thing deserves an appreciation post or a long-term review, something that I've used for a really long time. I've obviously shown you tons of samples, images, photos, and things like that that I've shot with this thing. Probably tons of reviews out there that are really old now, and maybe this is good for a 2019 update on this lens. And yeah, if you want to get one of these, I'll put links in the description where to find that. But that's it for this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you disliked this video, give it a thumbs down twice. Don't forget to hit that notification bell. I'll see you guys in the next one. Lens on lens. Well, that doesn't work because I got face detection. Well, Tiffin Black Pro Mist. I can't use it on this lens, can I? 2.8 centimeters. If I said 2.9, people will be stabbing me with pitchforks. And obviously this lens, man, why do I always say camera? Ugh. Do I say that? I don't even know. Make sure there's no things on my shirt so I don't have to motion track them out, because I've done that before. Best lens you can get, really. Best lens made today, made 7 years ago.